2020. Thank you very much for joining us and for your continuation in partnering with us in the management of the COVID-19 pandemic here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Of course, over the past few days, we've had good news that there has been a vaccine and which has been approved, Pfizer vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, which has been rolled out in the United Kingdom. That's the good news. However, the bad news is that the BBC has an article that states that rich countries are hoarding the COVID-19 vaccines, and that even though we have a vaccine commitment which has been preached from this pulpit about COVAX and COVAX managing to secure 700 million doses of the vaccine, or paying for them to be distributed between the 92 lower income countries that have signed up. We are getting this news that the rich countries are hoarding the COVID-19 vaccine. That's not good news. I would invite, firstly, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, our Medical Chief of Staff at the Joseph N. France Hospital, to give us a presentation on guidelines for mass gatherings. Dr. Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Can we start with the presentation? Now, when our borders opened on the 31st of October this year, we knew that there was going to be a great risk of reintroduction of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that caused COVID-19. And while we have very stringent protocols and procedures in place at our ports of entry, we know that there was still a significant risk of the virus entering the Federation undetected. And one of the things we have is this false sense of security, where if we hear that we have 25 cases, we assume that those are the only 25 cases. But it could be that 1 or 2 cases might have slipped in and we did not know. And that is why, despite the fact that we have no evidence as yet of community spread, we still need to continue with the non-pharmaceutical measures that we know are effective in controlling the spread of the virus. The World Health Organization has advised that avoiding the 3 C's, crowds, close spaces, and close contact settings, can significantly reduce the risk of community spread. And this is why we are taking proactive steps to control this. Right now, we know that we have 25 confirmed cases. I would not be surprised within a very short period of time, next week, next month, we hear that we have these numbers increasing. And so we need to remain ever vigilant in controlling these. Now, the persons who organize mass events, they have been asking for some strict guidelines so that they can understand what are the protocols in place so that they can know whether or not they would get permission for their events. And we put together some protocols, and these were sanctioned by Cabinet this week. And I'm sure that you will be hearing from the officers also as to when we would start the introduction of this, which is almost immediately. Now, some persons ask, what is a mass gathering? An event counts as a mass event or mass gathering if the number of people it brings together is so large that it has the potential to strain the planning and response resources of the health system in the community where it takes place. And this is in the context of COVID-19, because prior to COVID-19, we'll be thinking about a mass gathering as a stadium that is packed with thousands of persons. But we now have to take into consideration the health system and whether or not we can deal with the outcome that would occur if we have significant spread following these mass events. One of the things we said about your actions as it relates to COVID-19, whereas, for example, if somebody knocks someone down, the person falls on the ground, and you see the immediate effect, you can go out unknowingly spread the virus, and your actions would not come into play until 2 weeks later when persons start getting sick. And we need to put into place things now to mitigate against this so that we don't have community spread. Now, in addition to the number of persons, we also take into consideration the location and the duration of the event. And we have a number of guidelines that we've put forward so that persons can follow. First, permission must be obtained from the Commissioner of Police, and this will be done in collaboration with the Chief Medical Officer for hosting these events. And we are asking organizers not to advertise these events until permission is obtained. We've seen situations where persons have been advertising events, people end up buying tickets, and then if they're not given permission, we have problems. Now, a gathering refers to a planned or spontaneous event, whether it is indoor or outdoor, with a small number of people participating or a large number of persons in attendance, such as community events, concerts, festivals, conference, parades, wedding, and sporting events. So we should be quite clear now what we are speaking about as it relates to these gatherings. Now, the number of persons present would significantly affect the risk as it pertains to the spread of COVID-19. The lowest risk, obviously, is associated with virtual events. And we recently saw the completion of the Calypso tents, where we had a number of persons looking at these events virtually at home in the safety of your bedroom or in your living room. And this is what carries the least amount of risk. Once we start bringing more and more persons together from different households, from different communities, together in one space, then the risk of COVID-19 spreading significantly increase. And so the highest risk is associated with a large in-person gathering, where it is difficult for individuals to remain spaced at least 6 feet apart, and attendees travel from outside the local area. And this is the scenario with the major mass events that we normally have round about Christmas and Carnival time. And so we're asking persons to take these things into consideration when they are planning their events. Because of this, we have decided to place a cap on the number of persons who can attend these events. And so going forward from now, there will be a cap on the number of persons who can attend these mass gatherings or social events, and this figure was factored into when we thought about the capacity of our healthcare system. In addition to the number of persons scheduled to attend, factored in when the decision is made is whether or not there will be music, dancing, alcohol, and the duration of the event. Because, as I said before, one can have 70 people sitting probably social distance at a funeral service, and they can cause much less risk as it relates to spreading the COVID-19 virus, as opposed to if you have 30 persons jumping and dancing, drinking alcohol and marrying within a closed space. And so it's not just the absolute number that we'll be looking at, but what happens at the events. Now, going forward, the event sizes would be in 3 main categories: small, medium, and large. Small is an event with persons number between 25 and 50, medium between 51 and 100, and large between 101 and 150. And consideration will also be given to whether or not the event is being kept indoors or outdoors. We know that the risk of the virus spreading is much greater if it's an indoor event as compared to an outdoor event. So a more favorable outlook will be considered if you are having the event outdoors. Now, the maximum cap, therefore, please go back to the slide. The maximum cap, therefore, until further notice is 150. For small family gatherings and where you have a few friends gathering, if the number is below 25, you would not require any permission from the Commissioner of Police. So permission will only be required if you're having an event with more than 25 persons. Next. Permission will also not be given for any indoor event that is over 100 persons, because I said before, the risk of the virus spreading in an indoor event is much greater as compared to an outdoor event. And the minimum square footage is 30 square feet per person for indoor events. so that you can have proper social distancing. As it relates to site visit, a visit will be made to the site to confirm the square footage submitted on the request, because sometimes persons submit applications and they give the incorrect square footage, whether knowingly or unknowingly. And an outdoor event location will also be visited to determine whether or not proper social distancing can be done when the event is being hosted. Sometimes persons ask, what is our break point where we would determine to put a stop to these events? If there is evidence of local COVID outbreak where we have isolated clusters of cases or evidence of community spread, then all social gathering and events will be stopped until the COVID-19 outbreak is contained. And what I mean by this, so far, all of the cases we've had have been imported. But if tomorrow we hear that there is a person who shows up, in the village or in Bastille with a call for a cold, with no history of travel, no history of contact with somebody who traveled, and they're tested and they're found to be positive for COVID-19, that would be indicative of community spread. And in that scenario, we'll have to put a stop on these multiplier events that lead to an increased spread of COVID-19. Now, there are certain things that the event promoters, entertainers, and organizers must know as it relates to the requirements. They have to submit their tax clearance and a valid business license from the Inland Revenue Department. A written outline of their protocols for hosting the event must be submitted with the layout of the venue and the security plan, and this will be vetted by the Commissioner of Police. They must submit the application on an online website, which will be provided to you just now, at least 15 days prior to the event. And we have committed to giving you a response within 3 to 4 days of your application, so that persons can't say they sent an application and had to wait several weeks before. And so this will make sure that you don't have to advertise before you get permission, because once you send your application in, you should get a response within 3 to 4 days of sending in the application. Now, the Protocols and Procedures is a very detailed document, but what I tried to do was to highlight the salient points and the most important guiding principles. But this would be circulated to all persons who are involved in mass events, entertainers, etc. And other matters that are addressed in the document is how you can promote healthy behavior while you're at the event, letting persons know, for example, if they're ill, they should stay home, because you could be advertised an event, and you could have persons who are showing up with flu-like illnesses, and it's important for us to make sure persons understand this. We address hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette, because in these, at these events, people are shouting, screaming, sometimes they're shaking hand, fist bumping, etc. We address adequate supplies, because it's okay for us to say you must hand sanitize, but sometimes persons can have an event and they may not have enough hand sanitizers, etc. We address physical barriers and guides, how you address food services at the event, the fact that you should not have any buffet service, and that most likely the food, if you're going to serve it, should be pre-packaged. So there are a number of issues that are dealt with in this document, and hopefully this document would be circulated widely so that all the event organizers, they should be quite clear as to the way forward, so that we can have a safe Christmas season, and we all can look forward to a new year with the vaccine around the corner, and hopefully within a few months we could be out of this crisis and be back to a near normal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilkinson. If it's one word that we have learned in the past months, weeks, we now hear super spreader events. New terminology, super spreader events. I now invite Superintendent Cromwell Henry, Divisional Commander for District A and a member of the COVID-19 National Task Force, so is Dr. Wilkinson, Superintendent, to give us his presentation.
Good afternoon, all, and thank you, Mr. Williams. just before I go into my presentation this afternoon will be based on the launching or the introduction of the website that Dr. Wilkerson made reference to, where persons will be able to apply for permission for their events and make the process more efficient and timely. I just want to touch on an incident that occurred recently, and again, this follow on from what Dr. Wilkerson would have mentioned, that despite our tight entry protocols at the borders, something or someone may slip through unnoticed and cause havoc in the community in terms of COVID-19 spread. I just want to bring an incident that occurred to your attention to give an example of what Dr. Wilkerson was referring to. One second. On Monday, the 7th of December, a cargo vessel was docked at the Deepwater Port. And as a public health measure, these vessels have been operating under condition that the crew remains on board and have no physical contact with persons on the dock. Just after 7 p.m. that evening, 2 of the ship's crew members were intercepted returning to the port in a vehicle being driven by a staff of the ship's local agent. The relevant authorities were informed and an investigation commenced. It was revealed that the men went shopping in a nearby supermarket before returning to the port. Well, the driver is presently in quarantine for 14 days, and the 2 crew members were detained and taken to the JNF hospital for testing. This incident is currently still under investigation, but I bring it so that you see these are the kind of incidents that could occur that could possibly put our people at risk. And that is why we continuously ask persons to adhere to all the COVID-19 protocols, despite the fact that people resist and ask, why do we have to follow them when you have such tight controls at the airport? Well, this is a reason why you have to follow the protocols. So we continue to admonish persons to avoid crowds or crowded areas, crowded places. Maintain your physical distance of 6 feet, wear face masks when in public, and practice good hand hygiene and sanitization habits. These are the things that would keep you safe should you come into contact with someone who may be positive. Once you are observing these protocols, then more than likely you would be safe. Now I'll go now into what I really want to speak to with respect to the website. It has been a long-awaiting project. Before the slide roll along, I will just speak. So the slide could remain up. That page could remain up while I give some background to the website. Now this website is part of the police force's COVID-19 response using technology. It provides for a total contactless means for event organizations and other members of the public to apply for permission to host events of all types, pay the necessary processing fee, and receive your approvals or otherwise without coming to the police station. It also allows for police officers in the field using a custom-built scanning app on their smartphones to scan the QR code that will be sent to event organizers and retrieve all the details and conditions for approval for that particular event. Again, this eliminates the need for the police officers to have to ask persons to present their written paper permissions, and police could have a digital version of their permission through their mobile phones. The project was made possible through a partnership between the UNDP, through its Carib Secure project in St. Kitts, the UK government, and the Ministry of National Security. All 3 entities shared the development costs of this application.